Hey y'all, it's me, Kevvie. Oh my gosh, y'all remember how great my reading was in September? Well, I may have just topped it. I read 15 books in October. I was participating in a readathon that really motivated me to read a lot. Oh, but first, let me tell you about Halloween. Oh, it was so much fun. I dressed up as Pajama Sam, a computer game character from my childhood. I've been wanting to dress up as him for years, so I was thrilled to finally bring my vision to life. I also made a fantastic drag mix to go with the look, so next time I booked somewhere, I'll get to perform it. Oh, I'm so excited. I totally lost my voice on Halloween because I went to a drag show and Lucy Stool performed my all-time favorite song. Oh, it was so much fun. All right, I've got so much to cover, so let's get to it. The first book I finished in October was The Bees by Laline Paull. I first heard of this a while back on Katya's channel, and I've been wanting to read it for quite some time. The Bees is a thriller set in a beehive, and all of the characters are bees. Yeah. It was so cool getting to explore this beehive and experience the world as a bee. The hive basically acts as a convent, and the bees are all sisters, nuns in the congregation. There's a strict hierarchy, and our protagonist Flora is meant to be the lowest of the low, a mute sanitation worker. However, she can speak and produce royal jelly. Because of her unusual abilities, she's able to climb the social ladder while living in perpetual fear that one day her differences will be seen as a deformity and she will be killed for them. The hive follows 2 strict rules: accept, obey, serve, and only the queen may breed. Breaking of either of these rules results in death. The Bees is a thriller, but it's not your typical thriller. Rather than having a conflict where the stakes rise higher and higher throughout the book, there's a thrilling conflict for a chapter or two, and then it's quickly resolved, tensions released, business goes back to usual. Then there's a new conflict, which is also quickly resolved. The book was kind of predictable, but I don't fault it that, because it told its story very well. I really enjoyed this book and definitely want to read more from her. I read 2 books this month from Steve Cavanagh. The first was The Liar, book 3 in the Eddie Flynn series. I love the Eddie Flynn series so much. Eddie Flynn is an ex-con artist, recovering alcoholic with a crumbling marriage, who now works as a lawyer, defending clients only if he is convinced they are innocent. Such a great series. I've been reading them out of order, so despite this being book 3, it's actually the 5th one I've read. I have loved all of them so far, but I've gotta say, I think The Liar might be my favorite. In this book, Eddie is hired by Leonard Howell after his daughter's been kidnapped. Leonard plans to use Flynn's conning trickery on the FBI so that they can pay the ransom, but it backfires, and Leonard ends up on trial for the murder of his daughter. It's hard to talk about these books without spoiling a lot, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. It is an awesome book, and you should definitely read this series. After that, I read Twisted, Steve Cavanagh's first standalone novel. This one is about 3 people: Mary, her controlling and secretive husband Paull, and her lover, Daryl. Not that Daryl, different Daryl. The book begins with Mary and Daryl realizing the magnitude of the secrets Paull has been withholding, and them forming a plan so that she can get what she's entitled to. This book is incredibly twisty. It also does some creative formatting stuff. After the Steve Cavanagh title page, there's a second title page, this time identifying J.T. LeBeau as the author. Then, throughout the rest of the novel, at the top of the page where it would normally say the author's name, it says J.T. LeBeau as well. The book does get a little meta, because it's about an anonymous author writing a thriller called Twisted. Oh my gosh, it was so good. I finished it in 3 days. Cavanagh's books are compulsively readable. His chapters are literally, on average, 3 to 5 pages. Twisted does change things up, with several chapters being closer to 10 pages. That does slow it down in the beginning, but it does speed up quickly. But yeah, a bunch of really short chapters, super fast-paced, excellent, enjoyable, entertaining reads. I read 2 classic mysteries in October. The first was by my all-time favorite mystery writer, Mary Roberts Rinehart. I read the second book in the Miss Pinkerton series, The Haunted Lady, as a buddy read with Animo Shoshin. Oh, it was so good. Eliza Fairbanks is an elderly widow, and she believes her family is trying to kill her. Rats and bats have been appearing in her bedroom, when there doesn't seem to be any way for them to get in. Sure, that's suspicious, but what really convinced Eliza of her danger is when she finds that her sugar bowl has been laced with arsenic. I loved The Haunted Lady. I've loved almost every single book I've read of hers. She writes mysteries like no one else can, and I'm so glad that Mo and I got to experience this book together. Then I read my first Agatha Christie in, oh gosh, I can't even remember. Was it February? I think it was February. Fuck. I love that I've been reading so eclectically and diversely this year, but also, I went into this year thinking I would finish Agatha Christie, but I've only read 4 this year. But I finally got to one in October, and that was Why Didn't They Ask Evans? Like I used to do, I'm going to save my review of this one until I have a few more Christies read, and then I'll review them all at once. And I plan on spending the rest of the year prioritizing Christie and other mysteries. I listened to and read several Stephen King novels this month. I prioritized him because I was participating in the Bookish Drummers Stephen King readathon. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I was on Team Annie Wilkes, and we won! All but one of the books I read this month counted toward the readathon. The first Stephen King book I finished in October was Duma. It's one of Jake at the Bookish Drummers' favorites. It's about an architect, or carpenter, one of those things, who loses an arm on the job, and he decides to spend his recovery painting in the Florida Keys. He experiences phantom limb pain, but then his phantom limb seems to develop psychic abilities. I really didn't know what to expect going into this book, and I was so impressed. This was also the longest of the Kings I listened to, and me and Long King just get along so well. Really enjoyed this. I got Gerald's Game for my birthday last year, and I was so excited to read it. It's about a woman whose husband wants to spice up their love life, so they go to a secluded lakeside cabin, and he handcuffs her to the bed. Then he dies, and she's still cuffed to the bed, stuck. I love that premise, and I really wanted to see how she could escape. This book, however, was just not what I expected. For starters, she's not alone in the cabin. She keeps company with a slew of voices in her head. The voices are all unique characters, either ideal traits or people from her past, all giving her input on how to escape, or arguing with her and with each other. I have enough problems with people who hear voices, so I really didn't enjoy that. Also, a few chapters in, they reveal she's a Republican, so I didn't feel as bad about what was happening to her. My biggest issue with this book is a huge trigger. Huge child sexual assault. So if you'd rather not hear me discuss that, go ahead and skip to this time code. Okay, are you ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stephen King devoted way too many chapters to a flashback about Jessie getting molested by her father. Throughout these chapters leading to the assault, King repeatedly describes Jessie as if she were lusting after her father. She decides to wear a dress that is too tight and too short because she knows it's Daddy's favorite. And she's going to wear lipstick because Daddy likes it. She sees him chopping wood or something with his shirt off, and she's like, damn, he's so hot and glistening with sweat. I don't even see him as my father right now. I just see a hot man. Oh. What the fuck? I haven't felt this disgusted by a book since 120 Days of Sodom. My issue isn't that King wrote about child sexual assault. Yeah, I didn't love that, but if I'm being fair, it is a real but horrible thing that does happen sometimes, so it makes sense to include it in a horror novel. My issue with it is the victim-blamey way in which King wrote it. It felt like all the chapters leading up to the assault were King excusing or justifying what was about to happen to her, like he thought she was asking for it. And that is just so fucked up. It was disgusting, abhorrent, and it disturbs me that he wrote it. And then After subjecting us to that traumatic scene across several chapters, he makes us relive that childhood trauma a second time because there was one teeny tiny insignificant detail that would help her figure out how to escape. Now that is just cruel and superfluous. There were a couple of things I did like about this book. The scene where she finally escapes from her handcuffs was so horrific and gory. Oh, it was excellent. And the ending, when we find out the truth about the mysterious shadowy figure, oh, that was so good. But it just did not make up for how awful the rest of this was. Frankly, I should have DNF'd it, but I pushed through because I felt obligated, because it was a gift. I was doing this readathon and I had hyped it up for so long. I really wanted to listen to Needful Things because it's another one of Jake's favorites, but I was hesitant because it was narrated by King himself, and I've heard he's a terrible narrator. I finally caved, and oh boy is he bad at this. King really should just stick to writing. Also, I'm sure the story was unique when it came out, but now I feel like the story's kinda old news. Like Rick and Morty told the same story years ago and were able to condense it down to a half-hour segment. So when it spent so long building up to this reveal that the items from the shop came with a twist, like, I already knew that. I don't know, I couldn't get into it. People were killing each other, and I just didn't care. Eventually, I wound up speeding it up to triple speed just to get it over with. Such a disappointment. The last Stephen King novel I listened to in October was Misery. Fitting, because in the readathon, I was Team Annie Wilkes. I'm sure that even if you haven't read this, you've seen the movie or at least know what it's about. An author is held captive by an obsessed fan, forcing him to write a new novel in her favorite series, while also keeping him sick and sedated. As I was getting into this book, I was surprised by how fast it was moving. So many beats in this film occurred so early in the novel, and I was left wondering how could they fill up the rest of this time. Turns out there's a book within a book, and we wind up reading the majority of this new Misery novel as well. Like literally 5 chapters in a row, and then more chapters scattered throughout. That really did pad the story, and I didn't think it was necessary. The events in the book Paul Sheldon was writing had no leverage or relevance to how he would escape, so I just didn't care. I tuned out during most of those chapters. Other than that, though, I really enjoyed it. It was pretty gruesome, and the way Sheldon gets revenge on Annie in the end is glorious. I read quite a few horror novels this year to celebrate the spoopy season. First off was Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. I haven't been particularly drawn to his work because he writes in a lot of subgenres that just don't appeal to me. Exorcisms, 80s nostalgia, creature features, but Horrorstör had the most intriguing premise. It's a haunted house story, which again isn't my usual cup of tea, but it is a haunted house story set in an IKEA. And the book is formatted to look like an IKEA catalog. Oh, it's so cool. Seriously, like look at this. The copyright page is designed to look like a catalog ordering page. Then each chapter starts off by showing you a piece of IKEA furniture for sale. The unique formatting alone makes this book worth reading. But also the story it told was so good. The horror elements were perfectly foreshadowed in earlier chapters. I would say to myself, ooh, I hope that comes back around. And then it would. A few of the more traditional ghostly bits were lost on me, but I liked the lore and the backstory of the haunting. The ghost's motivation, if you will. Very good. Hendrix did an excellent job at taking this IKEA setting and amplifying the most horrific bits. I'm still not sure if I'd like his other books as much, since they seem to be so steeped in those specific horror subgenres, but I'm certainly more open to them now that I know how good he can be. I have been wanting to read Dead Silence since I first heard about it last year. I mean, come on, it's Titanic in space. 20 years ago, a luxury space cruise liner disappears. Its passengers are never seen or heard from again. Now, Claire and her crew pick up a distress signal at the edge of the solar system and decide to investigate. What they uncover is worse than they could have possibly imagined. One thing this book did really well was build tension. At the beginning, there are 2 timelines. Then, which was 2 months ago when Claire and her crew heard the distress signal, and now, where Claire is being interrogated after being the sole survivor of the expedition. So we know right off the bat, her team is going to die, which leaves you wondering, how? At a certain point in my reading, I realized that the then chapters were over in 40 pages, meaning that by that time, everyone we'd be following would be dead. Oh, and that just had me on the edge of my seat, wondering, when is it gonna happen? When are they gonna start dying? And oh boy, it was horrific. Mind you, we also reached that point fairly early. There's still like over a half book to go, and so many more places for this book to take you. Oh, it's just brilliant. I also loved the mystery behind what happened to this ship and to Claire's crew. Was it ghosts? A virus? Aliens? The truth of it was just completely unexpected, and I loved it. Y'all, I was hyped for this book for practically a year, and it absolutely lived up to the hype. Definitely one y'all should read. Author and booktuber James Flynn sent me an arc of his new novella collection, a bunch of 5 stories that pack a punch. Like the other book of his I read, each story begins with a poem, a handful of rhyming couplets to prepare you for the tone and subject of the upcoming story. Unique to this collection is that each story ends with a punch to the face. I really liked that format. The first story, Ignorance is Bliss, was really good. It's about a couple of guys trying to track down Bigfoot and finding something far, far worse. The second story in the collection is Dadaism, which I think was my favorite in the collection. It's about the horrors of social media being taken to the furthest extreme, where it is legally mandated to upload every single moment of your lives online. This one was the biggest punch in the face for me because it felt so real and relatable. Like, this seems like where our society could be going. If I'm being completely honest, I wasn't a fan of the third story. The description of the fat sex worker was so rude and disrespectful. As a fat reader, I really didn't appreciate that. Our bodies, our fatness is not horrific. It's normal, it's natural, and it's beautiful. Didn't like the twist in that story either. I'm sorry if that was too direct, too pointed. I don't mean this as an attack. I don't think badly about Flynn's character or his writing because of this. I just wouldn't have felt right reviewing this book if I didn't address that one issue, because it means a lot to me. A Bunch of Fives ends with a bang in its final story, about a hitman taking an unusual gig. I thought it was such a great way to wrap up the collection. Overall, I thought A Bunch of Fives was really good, and I will definitely continue to read his work. A couple of years ago, I became obsessed with this new anime called Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. In October, I finally picked up the manga. Toilet Bound Hanako-kun is about a school plagued with ghosts, including the titular Hanako, a spirit who haunts the girl's bathroom and must grant a wish when summoned. Yashiro goes to him looking for love, and instead winds up stuck as Hanako's assistant. Together, the two of them monitor the school's other ghosts, making sure no one spirit gets too powerful or hurts too many people. It's a great series, and I really loved getting to read the source material. Definitely going to continue reading them. Already have book 2 right up there. There it is. I read one poetry collection in October, How to Be Drawn by Terrence Hayes. I forget which channel I heard about it on, but it sounded interesting, so I picked it up. It was fine. It didn't resonate with me the way Essex Hemphill or Jean Jordan did, but I'm still glad I read it. The last book I want to share was a recommendation from my wonderful roommate Zerby. She wanted me to listen to Woman and Other Monsters by Jess Zimmerman. This feminist work looks at classic monsters like Medusa, the Sirens, the Furies, the Sphinx, and uses personal narratives to analyze how these monsters influence how we treat women today. Oh, it was so good. Real quick, I want to read to you from the very beginning of the book, where Jess Zimmerman has a note to the reader. This book is called Women and Other Monsters. We'll get into what monsters means. We'll spend the whole book getting into that, really. But first, a quick note on the word women. I use the term in its broadest possible sense, encompassing people who identify as women, regardless of assigned gender at birth, and people who have at some point been seen and treated as women, regardless of current gender. At issue is less the experience of feeling like a woman or knowing yourself as a woman, whatever that may mean to you, but facing the assumptions and expectations and limitations placed on women under patriarchy. If you were raised and socialized as a girl, if people around you tried to prepare you from an early age for life as a woman, this book is for you. even if you turned out not to be a woman after all. If your body or presentation causes people to react to you as a woman, or to react to you in ways that are influenced by the cultural opinion of women, this book is for you. Although trans women and non-binary people face additional expectations, restrictions, and oppressions that I may not always cover. And honestly, if you were socialized and are responded to and identify as a man, you may even find something here for you too. One of the consequences of living in a profoundly misogynistic society is that it's considered insulting to men to be compared to women. Even men who have always been seen as men may have been told their anger or sadness or sexuality was somehow too feminine. If that's you, although this book isn't written with you in mind, it isn't intended to shut you out. See, I love how inclusive Jess Zimmerman is with writing this book and including all kinds of women. Oh, it's so good. Oh shit, I almost forgot one book. I don't even have it scripted, so I've just got to wing this. One night toward the end of the readathon, I felt like I was starting to fall asleep. I wanted to listen to something, but I didn't want to play an audiobook I actually wanted to pay attention to. So instead I picked up a book called Lost Beauty Queens, a trans short story collection that has been on my radar for a while, but I've been wary of. See, this book is about transgender Latino women, but the cover shows a cis male drag queen, and the audiobook is recorded by a dude. Like, clearly the publisher and the marketing team do not understand the book that they are publishing, which had me apprehensive of it. Now, to be fair to the book, I did fall asleep for most of it, but I did like what I picked up, and it was short, only 3 hours. Will I pick it up again sometime to fill in the blanks? I don't know, but I'm glad I experienced it. In some capacity, at least. So there you have all the books I read in October. Damn. Are you impressed? Because I'm fucking impressed. What were your best and worst reads in October? Are you going to read any of these? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!